Hey, hello everyone and welcome back to our educational space. My name is Christian PD and today I have the pleasure to present you or introduce you some interesting aspects about phonetics, specifically about the pronunciation of the S sound. And absolutely with my partner Dylan Morales. Exciting YouTube tutorial, we will explore the subtle but fundamental differences between the sound of S and S, along with S in third person verse in English. Mastering the pronunciation of these sounds is essential to improve your fluency and communication in English. In this video, we will guide you through clear and practical examples so you can perfect your pronunciation and avoid common mistakes. So get ready to immerse yourself in the world of English phonetics and perfect your language skill. Let's begin.
Hello, welcome again. I am Dylan Morales, and to begin, I will tell you a little about the pronunciation of the S sounds. The pronunciation of words ending in S depends on the final consonant sound. For this reason, at the first instant, I have the pleasure to introduce you the three ways to pronounce the S. The first way to pronounce it is like a S, and here we can identify the pronunciation by looking at the consonants, for example, PH and TH before the S at the end. The second way to pronounce it is like a Z, and here we can identify the pronunciation by looking at the consonants, for example, B, D, G, L, and M, and so on one more. The vowels, for example, before the S at the end. And the final way to pronounce it is like a is, and here we can identify the pronunciation by looking at the consonant, for example, CH, SH, and GE before the S at the end. Well, now we are going to learn more about the S sound. The sound S is a voicelet alveolar fricative in phonetics. And now I will tell you a little more about the phonological characteristics of the sound. Place of articulation. The sound S is alveolar in the place of articulation because the S sound is produced by narrowing the airflow toward a groove between the alveolar ridge, the bony right just behind the upper front tip, and the front part of the tongue. The manner of articulation. The sound S is a fricative in the manner of articulation. S is produced by creating a turbulent airflow by forcing air through a narrow constriction causing friction between the articulators, in this case the tongue and the alveolar ridge. Voicing. The sound S is a voiceless. It's pronounced without vibrating the vocal cords. The vocal cords don't vibrate during the pronunciation of the sound. Why does the S sounds cause problems for a Spanish speaker learning English as a foreign language? Is an excellent question to answer. It is very clear that the S sound often pose challenge for Spanish speakers learning English as a foreign language for several reasons. Voicing distinctions. In Spanish, the letter S is typically pronounced as a voiceless alveolar fricative, which is similar to the English sound of as in sing. In contrast, the English has a clear distinction between the voiceless and voice sounds. The S in English is a voiceless, meaning that the vocal cords don't vibrate during its pronunciation, while the S sound in Spanish is also voiceless, but differs slightly in articulators. The place of articulation of the S sound in English is usually closer to the alveolar ridge, while the S sound in Spanish is usually produced further back in the mouth. This positional difference can cause pronunciation problems for the Spanish speakers. Tips for pronouncing the S sound in English. Voice. Make sure your vocal cords don't vibrate during the pronunciation of the S sound in English. It should be a voiceless sound, not to be confused with the voice Z sound, found in words like zebra. Airflow. Allow a contact narrow stream of air to pass between the tongue and the alveolar ridge. The airflow must be continuous and must not create turbulence like the Spanish sounds. Examples of the S sounds: slips, books, hats, cliffs, grats, as, attacks, claps, accounts, jumps.
Hey, I am here once again. Well, now we are going to learn more about the Z sound. The sound Z at the end as it occurs in the correct pronunciation is S, and it has the following phonological features. For example, place of articulation. Yeah, place of articulation for Z is alveolar, and this means that the tone is positioned close to the alveolar ridge, which is the body ridge used behind the upper front teeth to create a necessity constriction for the sound. On the other hand, manner of articulation. Of course, the sound z is fricative. Is classified as a fricative sound because fricatives are produced by the flow of air through an aerobic constriction in the vocal tract. In the case of z, the constriction is formed by bringing the tone near the alveolar ridge, creating turbulent airflow, and also voicing. Other important characteristics. Well, the sound z is voiced because voiced sound, which means that the vocal cords vibrate when producing this sound. The vocal cords come together, and when the air passes through, then they vibrate, creating the characteristics buzzing or humming sound. Why does the z sound cause problems for Spanish speakers learning English as a foreign language? Well, the sound z can pose challenge for Spanish speakers learning English as a foreign language for several reasons. For example, lack of z in Spanish. Spanish doesn't have that z sound in phonetic inventory. Spanish speakers are more accustomed to using the unvoiced alveolar fricative sound s, like in the Spanish word casa. As a result, the z sound in English words like zebra or race isn't a natural sound for them, and they may substitute it with some more familiar in Spanish. Well, now I can say you some tips for pronouncing the z sound in English. I consider that the most important tips would be listen and imitate. Listen to native speakers. Yeah, pronouncing words with z sound and try to imitate them. My mic native speakers can help you get the pronunciation right. The second one, practice regularly. Consistent practice is essential. Spend some time every day working on your z sound. Over time, you will improve your pronunciation. It's important to me to show you some examples of the z sound. And you can see the examples here in the screen. Crabs, words, backs, tilts, trims, thems, plays, reads, rums, films. And finally, it's the turn of the pronunciation of the sound S. Well, the sound S typically represents the voice alveolar sibilant S. Sound which is commonly found at the end of words when the final letter S is pronounced as Z. And of course, I'm going to tell you the phonological features of the S sound. The first one is the place of articulation. Yeah, the place of articulation for the Z sound is alveolar because the sound is produced by bringing the blade of the tongue against the alveolar ridge, which is the area just behind the upper front teeth. As well, manner of articulation. The manner of articulation for the sound Z is sibilant because it's a fricative sound with a hissing or buzzing quality. This is because the airflow is constricted between the tongue and the alveolar ridge, causing turbulence and the characteristic hiss. Why does the Z sound cause problems for Spanish speakers learning English as a foreign language? Well, Spanish speakers learning English may find the Z sound at the end of word challenging because it doesn't exist in Spanish, causing pronunciation and voicing differences, potential speech confusion, and the need for focused practice to master his sound. Tips for pronouncing the Z sound in English: the correct shape of the mouth. Your mouth should be slightly open of your tongue, should be relaxed, and the duration of the Z sound usually has the longer duration compared to the human voice in Z. Well, now I can say you some example of the Z sound. Absolutely, you can see the examples in the screen. Races, buses, prices, kisses, watches, changes, damages, brushes, witches, matches. Well, it was all. And finally, to summarize, in this tutorial we have explored the three ways of pronouncing the letter S in English, as, for example, S, Z, and S. Remember that the way you pronounce the S can significantly change the meaning of a word in English. So, paying attention to this sound is essential. Practice regularly, listen to native speakers, and use the techniques we've covered to improve your pronunciation. Feel free to return to this tutorial whenever you need to refresh your knowledge. and continue perfecting your English pronunciation. Thanks for watching and see you on the next video.